Sure. And before I get there, what I'd like to do is just talk about the difference between influenza and COVID. I hear sometimes people saying that it's just like the flu, and I want to sort of show some of those data so that people can see that it is quite a bit different actually. Here, what I've given are the last 3 years of influenza or the flu outbreaks that have occurred in South Dakota. In 2019, there were 33 deaths from flu, and there were almost 15,000 reported cases. Then we have this thing called a case fatality rate. And what that is the percent of the people who get the disease that die from it. So in the case of flu last year, that was less than 1%. So 0.2% of the people who got flu would have died from it. So if we took that 33 divided by 14,777, we'd come up with 0.2%. That's how you calculate it. Now, this slide shows the last 3 years of it. 3 years ago, the flu outbreak was a really bad one. It was a very serious flu in that it caused a lot of deaths. Flu doesn't normally do this, and it caused 73 deaths. There were almost 6,000 cases, and 1.2% of those cases died. So that was a very bad year for the flu. Last year, pretty mild, other than the fact that 33 people did die. I shouldn't downplay that too much. If you look at SARS-2, that's the virus that causes COVID. So far, there have been 121 deaths in South Dakota. And we use as the denominator the number of people that have actually recovered from it, because the 1,000 people that still have COVID may still die from it. So we don't know what their outcome is. So we're just using as the denominator that 7,214. And if you calculate that out, you're coming up with 1.7% of the people who get the disease will die from it. If you look at the country as a whole, the case fatality rate is running right now about 3.6%. And I think there's a couple of things to remember. First, COVID is a new disease. The flu is not new. So no one has any immunity to COVID, whereas people can have some immunity to influenza. And unlike influenza, there's no vaccine for COVID, where there is a vaccine for influenza. So in the case of the flu, your population that's at risk of getting it is going to be a lot smaller than the population that's at risk for getting COVID. The thing that I was wondering about is, why is the case fatality rate for South Dakota so much lower than the rest of the country? So I tried to look at this. I've always had in the back of my mind the cases in South Dakota are younger. And we do know that the case fatality rate increases with increasing age. So maybe it's just that a lot of the cases in South Dakota have been among young people. And that's why that when you look at the whole population and don't look at it by age, you see what looks like a low case fatality rate. So I tried finding the data for the US so that we could see how South Dakota compared. And I really couldn't find it for the age groups that are given here. These are the age groups that are on the Department of Health website for COVID. So I had to find case fatality rates that use these age groups in order to compare them with the South Dakota data. And I was able to find an article in the Journal of the American Medical Association, that reference is down at the bottom of this slide, that actually gives the case fatality rates for Italy and China. And this was as of earlier in the outbreak back in February and March. And you can see here that South Dakota, the case fatality rates are not that different than what you see in Italy and China. If you look, for instance, at the 50 to 59-year-olds, 1.3% of the people in that age group will die from COVID if they get the disease in South Dakota. If you go up to the 70 plus, it's 14%. So, that's quite a substantial increase with age. If you're in that 60 to 69-year age group, 3.5% of the people who will get COVID would die with a case fatality rate of 3.5. And those are similar to what you were seeing in Italy and China. In that older age group, China's was actually quite a bit lower, 9.8. I have no way to explain that. And Italy, we have a higher, 16.3 or 4. And maybe there's differences in the age distribution within that 70 plus. Maybe Italy has on average, 90-year-olds, more 90-year-olds than South Dakota did, or maybe China, most of the 70 plus in their population were more towards that 70, because this is something that goes up with age and isn't like just in blocks. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so this, I think, shows that the case fatality rates are quite high in the older age groups. So far, South Dakota has been doing really good because the cases have been in the younger ages, and hopefully it stays that way, or we can keep the case fatality rate low.